Black Sun Rising is the second collection of backup strips from Doctor Who magazine. I reviewed the first volume, Return of the Daleks, a few weeks ago, and I will put a link to that in the video description. This one contains 18 stories that were originally published between 1980 and 1992. First is Yonder Viti, written by Steve Moore with art by David Lloyd. It tells the story of three monster hunters who travel to Tibet in search of the Yeti, only for one of them to be killed and taken over by the Great Intelligence, before a local lama summons an army of Yetis to save the day. It's basically a modern-day sequel to The Abominable Snowmen. It's okay, I guess, but not a great start. Black Legacy is the first story written by legendary comics writer Alan Moore, who's credited here as the original writer, for reasons far too complicated to go into. A group of Cybermen travel to the dead planet of Goth in search of weapons created by the legendary Deathsmiths, only for them to be killed off one by one by the mysterious Apocalypse device. The device itself does have a nicely creepy look to it, but the Cybermen's dialogue feels far too emotional and doesn't really ring true to their TV portrayals. Business as Usual is again written by Alan Moore with art by David Lloyd, and shows you what would happen if the Autons invaded and the Doctor wasn't around to stop them. Set in the far-off world of 1989, the structure is more complex than usual, showing how the Autons set up their company in the first place, before an industrial spy sneaks in and ends up causing their downfall. And there's a nicely ironic ending as well, so it's definitely the best strip so far. Star Death is the first instalment of Alan Moore's trilogy about ancient Gallifrey, with some impressive art by John Stokes. It's only 4 pages long, but it manages to weave together all the Time Lord lore established up to 1980, showing how Omega ended up on the other side of the black hole, and you even get a glimpse of Rassilon. So it's a real treat for all Doctor Who fans. The Touchdown on Deneb 7 is written by Paul Neary with art by David Lloyd. Unusually, it features the Doctor and K9, although the Doctor is only shown from behind for some reason. The Tardis lands on a barren moon, and while the Doctor sleeps, K9 goes outside to investigate, and it turns out to be inhabited by robots, so naturally he invites them all on board the Tardis. This is clearly just meant as a humorous interlude, and feels like it's aimed at a younger audience than most of the stories. Voyage to the Edge of the Universe is by Paul Neary and David Lloyd. It starts out like a prequel to the Daemons, with Azal and his crew setting out from their home planet, but instead of arriving at Earth, they end up in an infinite white void at the edge of the universe. And in a very weird ending, they end up stuck there. So it's very thought-provoking, but I'm not sure I understand it. Crisis on Kaldor is a sequel to The Robots of Death. There have been many other sequels on books and audios, but this could be the only time we ever get to actually see what Kaldor City looks like. After 3 sand miners are found with all of their robots dead, an investigator sneaks aboard one to try and find out what's going on. It turns out a sentient robot has been liberating them, but before he can tell anyone, he's killed by the robot himself, making for a nicely ironic ending. 4D War is the second part of Alan Moore's Gallifrey trilogy, and it introduces War Dog of the Special Executive, who goes on to appear in Alan Moore's Captain Britain comics, making this the first Marvel Doctor Who crossover. It also introduces the idea of Gallifrey fighting a time war, which would be explored in further detail in the 90s 8th Doctor Adventure novels, and also the new series in the 21st century. Here Gallifrey is not fighting the Daleks, but their opponents are something called the Black Sun. They don't feature much here, this is really just about setting up the mystery. The Greatest Gamble is the first story by John Peel, not the Radio 1 DJ, of course. It's the one who went on to write lots of Doctor Who novels. It has the Celestial Toymaker travelling to Mississippi to play cards against the unfortunately named Gaylord Lefevre, which ends badly when Lefevre tries to teach him. and the distinctive artwork by Michael McMahon makes this one a definite highlight. Black Sun Rising is the final story by Alan Moore, and this introduces more of the special executive as they try to stop the war with Black Sun before it starts. Unfortunately, it's not one of the best stories. It's been heavily cut down by the editor to fit in 4 pages, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. So it's a bit of a disappointing end to the trilogy. Skywatch 7 is written by Alan Mackenzie. It's basically a retelling of The Thing, only it came out a year before John Carpenter's movie. Obviously, they were both inspired by the original 50s version. This has a unit base in the Arctic, infiltrated by a Zygon, who starts impersonating the crew. And the trigger-happy captain ends up killing one of his own men. Mick Austin's art in the first part is much better than David Lloyd's in part 2. It is good to see units getting their own adventures, and I suppose this is the sort of thing you can expect to see in the upcoming spin-off show, The War Between the Land and the Sea. Minorous is again by Alan Mackenzie. It tells of a young Time Lord who makes his first trip to another planet, and he meets the people of Minorous, who want for nothing thanks to an alien machine, which is spectacularly depicted in John Stokes' excellent artwork. He decides to destroy the machine, as it's draining all the energy in the galaxy, but ends up only destroying himself and his Tardis. It's a good story, but the wisecracking robot orb is extremely annoying. The Gods Walk Among Us is by John Peel and David Lloyd. It tells of a tomb being uncovered in Egypt, which might make you think it's a sequel to Pyramids of Mars, but it's actually a prequel to The Time Warrior, as it concerns a Sontaran who came to Earth and enslaved the ancient Egyptians before they buried him alive, only for him to revive 5,000 years later. I did not know Sontarans could live that long, and there's no explanation for how this one does. Devil of the Deep is again by John Peel and David Lloyd. Unusually for David Lloyd, the artwork is actually really good. A castaway is rescued from a desert island, and it tells how he was himself saved by a sea devil. And they live together for years, as friends and, who knows, possibly even more. Until pirates attacked, and an impressive sea monster destroyed their ship. I guess this is what the Merca was supposed to look like. So yeah, it's got sea devils, pirates, sea monsters, what more could you want? The Fires Down Below is another unit story by John Peel with art by John Stokes. This has unit travelling under a volcano, only to find the Dominators and the Quarks. I don't think anyone's desperate for a sequel to the Dominators, but if you want one, then this is it. The Fabulous Isus by Steve Parkhouse and Jeff Senior brings back the character of Dr. Ivan Asimov from one of the 4th Doctor strips, as he imagines a series of scenarios for his latest book and gets himself in terrible trouble acting them out. It's really just a silly humour strip played for laughs, but the artwork is excellent, especially the highly detailed spaceship. A Ship Called Sudden Death is by Steve Parkhouse with art by Dave Gibbons, who of course later went on to collaborate with Alan Moore. This brings back the Freefall Warriors from the 4th Doctor strip of the same name, as they race against a nasty-looking bad guy called Shaman Khan. Again, not much of a story, but the artwork is excellent. Apparently there was another Freefall Warriors story in the Captain Britain magazine, but as far as I can tell, that's never been reprinted. Finally, The City of Devils, which feels like an unmade episode of K9 and Company, would almost certainly have been far too expensive for them to make. Sarah Jane and K9 travel to Egypt to explore an ancient underground city. There's no Sontarans this time, instead it's a whole city full of Silurians, sea devils, and pterodactyls, who all turned out to be quite friendly. It's written by Gary Russell, who went on to write the novel The Scales of Injustice, which also explores themes of the humans' relationship with the Silurians. And there's some excellent artwork by Vincent Danker, so it ends the book on a high note. Like the previous volume, there is commentary on every story by the writers and artists involved, which gives you some interesting insight into how it was all created. It's a much more varied collection than the last one. The stories are a lot shorter and more standalone than previously, But still, there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. So it's definitely worth a read for anybody interested in Doctor Who or British comics in general. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you like this sort of thing. I'm sure I'll be reviewing more Doctor Who comics in the future. The collections of the 5th, 6th and 7th Doctor's comics are all out of print, so no doubt there'll be new versions of those coming out over the next few years, and I will definitely be eager to get my hands on them. And when I do, you can be sure that I'll let you know what I think. So that's it from me. Until next time.